Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Minecraft Disney World. Today we are here in the Magic Kingdom in Fantasyland and we're standing outside of Winnie the Pooh, although we're not going to be taking a look at Winnie the Pooh, we're actually going to be taking a look at the ride that was here beforehand, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Now this is interesting because while I'll be talking about it as a retired ride, it's actually not completely retired. While the Disney World version is closed down, the Disneyland version is still in operation, and it actually was one of the first rides to operate from opening day 1955 that is still open today, although there have been some changes over the years. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the ride itself, it's based on the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which was a film that came out in 1949, and it was two smaller films, one about Mr. Toad and one about Ichabod Crane. And the Mr. Toad part specifically was an adaptation of a book called The Wind in the Willows, which had the story of Mr. Toad. What happens in the ride, if you've never been on it before, is that you get on this 1900 era's jalopy and you go through inside this dark ride that has all of these scenes with characters from Mr. Toad. What's cool is the jalopies themselves are named after the characters. For instance, Mr. Toad, Toady, Ratty, Moley, Cyril, Weasel, Winky. It's inscribed into each of the cars, and you go through and it plays out these different scenes in the Disneyland version, and it's sort of Mr. Toad going on this crazy adventure and always escaping from getting into trouble, whether it's from the law or otherwise. And what ends up happening is you end up escaping from a judge, you get sent to jail, you escape from jail, and then you end up in a weird twist for kind of a dark ride, is you hit a train head on, and then before you know it, you're in Disney's rendition of hell with like little demons jumping around. But of course, like all of the other scenarios, Mr. Toad eventually gets away, and then that's how you make it safely back to the unloading area of the ride. Now, what's cool is that the Disney World version, which was opened on October 1st, 1971, when the Magic Kingdom opened, it had a different setup. It actually had two tracks that you would go on, and unlike something like Space Mountain, where you're just like riding a mirror version of the other track, this was actually two separate different experiences. So on one side, you would go through a trophy room, a kitchen, a camp, a pub, and a rain room. And then this other track, you would go through a library, a barnyard, a town square, and then both of them you would end up going to jail and prison, and you'd end up hitting the train and going to hell. But it was interesting that you had these two separate rides that would give you different experiences, which showed that it was sort of like very much a precursor to what we see today with something like Star Tours that tries to offer you a different experience every time you ride it so that you have more incentive to go back and ride it again. Now, because this opened up in 1971, this was actually part of the ticket system, and it was known as a C-Ticket ride. If you didn't know what that means, back before you used to just buy a ticket to get into the park and ride whatever you wanted, you would have to pay to get into the park, and then you would buy a ticket book, and the different tickets had different costs, and they were for different rides. So, for instance, an e-ticket attraction was the most exciting attraction, and so it cost the most, and that's why today, when there are exciting attractions like the Seven Dwarfs Minecart train right across the way, it's still sometimes referred to as an e-ticket attraction, just to refer to how big or exciting it's meant to be. This one was a C-ticket attraction, sort of had a more antiquated style about it. It was a dark ride. It wasn't super fast. It used a lot of two-dimensional cutouts. It was very low-tech for the time, and probably the greatest example of seeing the bridge between what was traditionally a carnival ride or a fair ride to what would become a theme park ride, since Disneyland was the first theme park. It's very stylized, used a lot of great animation technique that made it seem more cartoony than any of the other dark rides at the time, like Snow White or anything like that. But unfortunately, like many rides, it was closed, and in Disney World it was closed on September 7th, 1998, and then it was eventually replaced with The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. You could find some tributes to Mr. Toad around the parks. For instance, there are paintings of Mr. Toad and Moley within the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And then in the Haunted Mansion, there's a pet cemetery outside of it, and there's a statue of Toad there. So why was it closed? Odds are it was closed just for business reasons. Mr. Toad wasn't necessarily the most popular character. The reason why it was perfect for Disneyland when the park opened was because The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad opened in 1949. It did really well. It was very popular. And then Disneyland would open just 6 years later. So it was still fresh in people's minds. And then from there, it sort of gained a following that was actually there until its very last day. In fact, when it was announced that it was closed, there was a grassroots movement that was hosted on SaveToad.com where they had almost 1,200 letters sent to Disney, and they would have people do toad-ins where they would show up to the ride with these green shirts in front of the attraction that would say, like, ask why Mickey is killing Mr. Toad. And people are, like, really angry about it. And that's something that's really interesting and unique to Disney. I don't think you see that happen with a lot of other theme parks out there. But that causes it to be one of those attractions that is really ranked up there as one of the most beloved attractions. And I think a lot of people would love to see it come back at some point. In fact, in 2012, there was a rumor going around that Disney was looking to do sort of a live-action animated mix movie based on the ride, which probably would have revitalized it and given it a second chance. But we haven't heard anything about that since, so who knows where that is. Anyway, I want to thank you for joining me. This was just a quick look at Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It was a beloved classic. I remember it a lot. If you want, you should really go and check out. They have videos of the ride through, or you could just check it out in person because, like I said, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is still operating in Disneyland, which makes it really unique now. It's very interesting. It is unforgettable, and it is definitely worth checking out. Do you have fond memories of Mr. Toad? Maybe you've ridden it before, maybe you haven't. I'd love to hear below in the comments, and I would also love to hear what other retired rides you'd like me to go and talk about. Maybe you have a personal favorite, or maybe you have one that you don't know much about that you'd love to learn more about. If you want to follow me on the social networks, I'm Rob Plays at Twitter, and I'm Rob Plays That Game on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch. Whatever you're doing this week, make the most of it because it makes it that much better, and I hope to see you next time for the next episode of Minecraft Disney World. Bye, everybody.